Hi everyone, I'm Jean, and my story proves that there's no such thing as female friendship. I've always sincerely believed that girls can be friends for life, but life itself proved me wrong. My best friend destroyed my illusions. Eve and I grew up together. Our parents were good friends, and during all joint gatherings, they sent the children to play together. It was almost a tradition to do so. I can't say that as children she and I got along. Actually, on the contrary, we argued a lot. But over time, forced communication transformed into actual sympathy, and then into a warm friendship. And later, when I was in my teens, Eve somehow became the closest and the most significant person for me. We discussed problems with each other, talked about guys, cosmetics, and such, even did homework together. Although we went to different schools. But she was great with the humanities, and I understood mathematics. So she wrote essays and short paragraphs for both of us. And I was in charge of math tests and lab assignments. We both grew up fast. And one day, Eve met a guy whom she later began to date. 16-year-old me wasn't thinking too much about guys, so I only gave her advice and supplied her with tissues when problems occurred in her private paradise. The funny thing is that I never actually managed to meet with Nastia's boyfriend in person. Each time we planned some sort of joint activity, some unexpected problems appeared, usually on my part, and the meetings got canceled again and again and again. So it turned out, for the whole year of their tempestuous relationship, me and Eve's boyfriend didn't even have a chance to see each other. Of course, she showed me a lot of photos, but the guy apparently was the worst model imaginable. Some photos depicted only blurry side shots. Other photos showed him in the middle of a kiss. Eve even managed to make several back-of-the-head photos of her boyfriend. Yes! Some of their kissing selfies were quite selfish, but I still got no idea how the boy looked in general. Later, it turned out to be important, because my carelessness in this regard came back to bite me. A year later, Eve broke up with him. It was quite a stupid breakup. I couldn't even sympathize with her. You see, he invited her to a party. She met another young man there, and that boy began courting her, and Eve reciprocated for reasons unknown. I suppose she was simply too drunk to turn a petty boy back, if not worse. Of course, her real boyfriend saw everything and rightly accused her of treason. Eve tried to deny her actions, saying that the devil must have tripped her, but the boyfriend didn't forgive her. As for me, I wouldn't have forgiven my own partner in such a situation as well. If you don't know how to drink properly, just don't, especially in unfamiliar company, or at least learn how to say the word no. But I didn't tell her that because I was still trying to be a loyal friend. That was the first moment when our friendship cracked. Apparently, Eve herself understood that she'd screwed up, but for some reason, she accused me of callousness. And she also remembered that I had to be at the party. They invited me, but again, I wasn't able to come because I was babysitting a little nephew, while his mother stayed at the hospital. As for me, that was a valid reason to skip a party. But Eve became furious and told me that I betrayed her. Then for a while, everything was relatively quiet between us. Eve was constantly crying and telling everyone around her that she still loved her cute little hair and apparently tried to make things up. But the hair either didn't react at all or even sent her packing. And then, when I was 18 and naive as hell, I myself fell in love. Mark and I met in university. And as they say in cheap novels, we immediately felt that spark. It really felt as if I was struck by a lightning bolt. I just looked at him and immediately realized that I wanted to bear him a child, or even 2 children, and a dog. I don't know whether you'll be able to understand me if you've never felt something like this. To my surprise, Mark apparently experienced a similar feeling because since that fateful moment, we were almost always together. I even moved to his apartment in the evening of that very day, and we began to live as a family. There were neither dates nor courtship, but we did not need it. Staying near each other and holding hands was everything for us. Mark turned out to be a wonderful person, the one who seemed to be tailor-made for me. Of course, both he and I had our own shortcomings, but together, we resolved to make both of us feel good. We still had arguments, sometimes even quarreled, but we were always able to reconcile. I loved him, and he loved me. At that time, I rarely communicated with Eve. She had problems with her studies, and for the most part, she was occupied with tests and exams. And then, The period when I wanted to tell everybody and their mother about my dream boyfriend, the first delight, ended. I no longer wanted to share my love with the whole world. So now the only pieces of info that I give Eve were phrased like this: "Everything's okay. It's a miracle. And we're planning a wedding for the summer." Still, Eve was generally aware of my personal life and provided an adequate reaction to the change of status in my Facebook profile. She liked my photos, wrote cute comments, and she even volunteered to help as a bridesmaid during the solemn engagement day. Of course, the engagement is not an earth-shaking event itself, but Mark and I decided that everything must be beautiful. We had balloons, a photographer, a DJ, and parents in the forefront. We were making everything for ourselves to be able to remember this moment forever. I trusted Eve so much that I allowed her to decorate the apartment to her liking. We had quite similar tastes. She was also responsible for our menu because I did not have time for such trifles. In fact, everything went just as Eve wanted. She really acted like a bridesmaid, only at the rehearsal of the wedding, not during the actual one. The evening itself was just perfect. Our parents quickly got along. Everyone danced to their heart's content. We took a lot of cool, joyful photos. And at the very end of the evening, Mark made me an offer with a salute on the background. Once again, we took pictures to keep the beautiful memories alive. And then everyone moved to the table for the last glass of champagne and the final dance. I felt that something was wrong during the dance. My head was spinning, my throat was all scratchy, and generally, I felt like I had a very strong allergic reaction. But there were 0 allergens nearby. I didn't eat anything bad and didn't even smell any harmful substance. In general, my allergy is a serious problem, but there's only several things that I should avoid at all costs. Peanuts and lilies are at the top of the list. Peanuts are still survivable for me, if I get a pill in time, of course. But lilies are a death sentence to me. Of course, all my friends are very well aware of this fact. Since Eve was responsible for the food, and she knew my eating habits better than her own, I was 100% sure that there were no peanuts in the dishes. But I felt so bad that I called off the evening, said goodbye to everyone, and went home. Mark wanted to go with me, but he still had to drive his parents home, so I said that everything was okay, and he stayed. I don't really remember how I got home. I vaguely recall that the taxi driver asked whether I needed to go to the hospital, but I assured him that I just needed the first aid kit and everything would be all right. Then I opened the door to the apartment and fell literally on the doorstep. The whole house smelled of lilies. Flowers stood in the hallway, in the living room, in the dining room, and I suppose there were lilies in the kitchen too. I don't even know for sure, because I didn't have time to make out. My respiratory system collapsed on the spot, and I practically died. I woke up already at the hospital ward. There were 3 people near my bed. Mark with a gloomy face, my mother who looked as if she'd been crying the whole day, and Eve. Mark immediately rushed to kiss me, and my mom let out a happy smile. But Eve just silently got up, went out into the corridor, and never came back. It turned out that I was saved by my neighbor, who by sheer chance decided to walk the dog at that very moment. When he opened his door, he immediately saw me, breathlessly laying on my own doorstep with a blue face. Somehow he guessed to close the door to my apartment, and then he dragged me to an open window. Besides, he gave me CPR until the ambulance arrived. Of course, I thanked the neighbor, but still refused to believe that Eve was accountable for the accident. At the moment, I did not want to sort things out because I was too weak and believed that everything that happened was just a terrible coincidence. And was it really naive for me to think that my best friend had put lilies everywhere in my house by accident? Later, after I was discharged and a period of rehabilitation, I gathered enough courage and decided to talk with Eve. I really had to clear things over. I hoped that we would be able to sue the delivery together or something like that, but the truth was very bitter and painful. Eve didn't even try to hide anything or lie. She honestly admitted that she planned everything from start to finish. It was she who gave me a tartlet with a ground peanut, and the lilies were the backup plan to surely finish me off in case the tartlet failed. But she made several small mistakes. Besides, I fell in the corridor and didn't even have the time to close the front door. And of course, Eve paid 0 attention to the possibility of a neighborly help. Of course, I survived by pure luck, because in any other scenario, her plan would have been completed with the expected result. Would you guess the exact reason of her actions? Remember, I told you before that I had never seen the face of Eve's ex. Well, it turned out that Eve dated Mark. That's not exactly the unexpected turn of events, of course, but for me personally, it was a real shock. How was that possible? My beloved turned out to be my friend's ex. And to think that I didn't even know about that. Unfortunately, Eve refused to listen to me. She was adamantly sure that I did everything on purpose because I knew how much she loved him. In her version of the story, it turned out to be an insidious lover and a bitch, and she was an innocent angel who only protected her happiness. She told all of that to the court, but in the eyes of the law, taking away a guy and taking someone's life are pretty different things. The first case is not a criminal offense, and the second one is a hideous crime. Eve was not sent to prison, since she wasn't successful in murdering me. Her punishment was a fine, the compensation for my treatment and rehabilitation, plus some money for moral damage. And they gave Eve a restraining order that prescribed her to stay more than 200 meters away from me and Mark. As for me, such punishment was more than fair. Actually, it was Mark who insisted on a fine for moral damage. I just never wanted to see Eve again. So that's the story about how envy, painful love, and distrust almost brought my ex-best friend to prison for trying to kill me. Was it worth it, you ask? Unlikely.
Hi all, I'm Melissa, and I'm afraid of my own mom. You see, she's already a middle-aged woman, yet she looks as if she's still in her prime. And I suspect that Mom remains young by using some horrible forbidden methods. Mom has always been quite a looker, while all the other girls and their moms in my kindergarten and later at school looked normal. My mother always seemed to be my younger sister, not a parent. All the other children were envious of me, and I was glad that my mom was that awesome. Well, yeah, I used to compare my mom with other girls' moms. I've often noticed how older women stopped being attractive with age. And believe me, some changes were pretty swift and drastic. Yet my mom managed to age without losing her beauty. We have quite a large family. I've got 3 older sisters, and the oldest of them, Angela, was the first one to notice Mom's unnatural youth. You see, when Angela was 18, she already had wrinkles and hid them using cosmetics. Angela and our mom quarreled a lot, and once I realized that my sister was quite right in her suspicions. Once Angela's boyfriend told her that our mom looked better than her. He even said that he'd better date our mom than Angela. According to him, our mom was a real woman who knew how to take care of herself. Angela, on the other hand, already had many wrinkles, hair that felt like hay, and smelled of sweat instead of flowers and fruits. That very evening, Angela broke up with her boyfriend and immediately moved out of our house. In parting, my sister accused Mom of being a witch, because according to Angela, it was clearly impossible for a woman with many children to have such a body. Later on, when our family lounged on a beach, I could not but compare Mom and my own sisters. Funny thing was, it turned out that the others were comparing them too. Some guys even asked one of my sisters for permission to get acquainted with her beautiful daughter, and they clearly weren't talking about me. Well, our tanned mother really looked gorgeous in a swimsuit, and she looked much better than the girls. She looked thinner and had no skin problems. Suffice to say, my sisters didn't like that either. So soon after vacation, they moved out too. Now there were only 2 of us in the whole house, and soon I realized that Mom's beauty looked unnatural indeed. I couldn't understand, how did she manage to stay beautiful and cute despite her age? I even compared her old photos with the photos taken in the aforementioned vacation. There was no difference whatsoever. Of course, Mom told me about makeup, skincare, shampoos, and sports. I listened to her and even tried to mimic her. Yet, well, I was already sure that Mom's beauty flew from some more sinister sources. Besides, my sisters were also adamantly sure that Mom was hiding something from us. At some point, Angela even gathered a meeting and told me that I had to search our mother's house to find the source of her youth. Apparently, witches have spell books with notes concerning such things. Well, if Mom was a witch, she didn't keep any of her witchy magical trinkets at home, that's for sure. I searched the whole house and even found 2 envelopes full of cash. Yet there were no magical books or suspicious diaries lying around. Well, Mom had a lot of books and magazines and such, but all of those were pretty trivial. And then Angela told me that I was in danger. Apparently, my sisters got better when they moved out of my mom's house. Even their sleep got better. According to Angela's words, she noticed that and saw a fortune teller. And that psychic told my sister that Mom was literally draining youth out of her children to remain beautiful herself. That's why my sisters look so bad. Well, I became really afraid and even asked Mom directly whether she cursed me or not. Mom only laughed, told me not to be stupid and pay more attention to skincare and sports. Okay then. For a few weeks, I believed Mom. But once, I noticed a bottle full of some strange liquid in the bathroom. The bottle was very large and its contents clearly smelled unnatural. And later on, I saw Mom putting that stuff on while doing some sort of ritual. Well, then I timed everything right and actually managed to steal that bottle. Of course, I never told anything to my sisters. They left me alone in the house that belonged to a witch after all. Apparently, the bottle really contained some sort of a youth potion. When I put that stuff on, my acne cleared up and my skin got much better. Besides, Mom was really upset when she realized that the bottle was gone. Now I feel kind of torn. On the one hand, I don't really believe that Mom could ever harm me. And on the other hand, there's Mom's unnatural youth, and the potion I stole from her really was some sort of magic. That's why I'm so afraid now. What if Mom really drained my sisters of their beauty? And now it's gonna be my turn? According to Mom, I have only to take care of myself and go in for sports and everything's gonna be fine. According to Angela, I'm in danger and really need to run. What should I do? Whom should I believe? I don't know.
Many greetings. I'm Catherine, and I've apparently brought up 4 incredibly stupid and lazy girls. Honestly, they believe in magic and witchcraft, yet they lack common sense to even take proper care of themselves. My own mother always told me that I should look good at all times. You can be the very best and the kindest person in the world, yet people will still judge a book by its cover. And if you look ugly, unkempt, and messy, no one will care about you. I've always tried to pass that wisdom down to my daughters, yet apparently I have failed in that regard. I guess I'm not that good of a teacher after all. Otherwise, they wouldn't be as stupid as they are. Poor things. I confess I didn't pay much attention to my eldest daughter's upbringing. The other 3 took all my time and attention, and I never had enough money to hire a personal tutor. Maybe that was the root of all of our problems. Angela never liked makeup as a whole. She knew about it, obviously, as I wore some all the time. She just stubbornly refused to use it. Didn't really know where she got those ideas, yet I always tried to respect her opinion. I remember there was a time I was even eager to buy her some rare eco-vegan makeup for her, if she ever desired so, and I told her about that idea. But in vain. The worst thing is that Angela never liked shampoos, body sprays, or hygiene items as a whole. I even had to argue with her to take a regular shower. She just ate as much fast food as she wanted, stayed in her room for days, and paid no heed to her looks. Well, looks didn't matter much at that point. It was just unhealthy to the extreme. That's how Angela ended up overweight, smelly, and already suffering from skin problems at the young age of 18. And all she's done is make a mockery of herself by following some weird principles of her own. My other 3 daughters, on the other hand, are, well, just plain lazy. Those 3 took an example from their elder sister and never bothered actually thinking about the consequences of their actions. Even my youngest daughter, the one who resembles me the most, was just as lazy as the others. Well, at least Melissa bathed more than once a week. And then my eldest accused me of being a witch. When I heard that for the first time, I laughed and laughed for a half-hour straight. Basically, they said that I was a witch because I bathed and took care of myself. The audacity. Of course, I told my daughters they'd look much younger and prettier if they actually made an effort to do so. The funny thing is, they were actually offended by my words. Accusing someone of witchcraft is so much easier and less work than doing anything about it. You see, I do a lot of stuff to look young and beautiful. I work out 3 times a week, go to the swimming pool twice a week, and never skip morning exercises. Besides, I know a lot about makeup, visit a beauty parlor at least once a month, and use a spectrum of expensive care products. All that stuff takes a lot of time and effort, but it allows me to look young for my age. Yet my girls are just plain lazy and would never do so much themselves. Therefore, they don't believe me. It's easier for them to believe some magic rituals and tricks, because honestly, it seems like a lot less effort than what I actually have to do. I even played a joke on my youngest. You see, I really hated her looking so unkempt, so I bought an impressive-looking bottle at a yard sale, dumped an expensive energizing body mask into it, and pretended to do some occult stuff with that potion. And then I accidentally forgot the bottle with the mask in the bathroom. Apparently my trick worked. Melissa took the potion and started using it. Now her skin problems are a thing of the past and she actually looks much healthier. My dear. Unfortunately, she never actually established a link between bathing and being healthy. She just thinks a magic potion did the trick, and that's honestly just so sad.
Hi, people. I'm Diana, and today I will tell you a story about how my whole family was in mortal danger due to only one rash decision. My brother Ryan and I grew up in a close-knit family. Everything changed when my parents decided to get another child. Let me get more precise. They really wanted to adopt one. You see, my mom's friend worked in an orphanage and once told her a tearjerker story about an orphan girl. Since then, our parents wanted to adopt that poor child. They even prepared a room for a new kid. And my brother and I could only put up with it and wait for our first meeting with our new sister. In a few days, our parents finally brought the girl home. Her name was Betty. Our new sister was a modest and quiet girl of about 8 years old. Parents arranged a festive dinner for all of us with a huge cake and gifts. But Betty have not said a word the whole evening. And later, she told Mom that she was very tired and wanted to sleep. My mom took her to the nursery, and Ryan and I continued to eat the cake and open gifts. After dinner, I went into my room and found Betty sleeping on my bed with my brother's tablet in her hands. Mom explained to us that our new sister needed some time to adapt, and we must give in to her in everything. So, on the very first evening, Betty got my room and Ryan's tablet. A week later, strange things began to happen in our house. Once, instead of sugar, someone poured salt into Dad's tea. And, at the same time, someone sweetened my mom's soup. At first, we all thought that it was Ryan. You see, my brother didn't like the whole idea of adoption and persuaded Mom and Dad to leave Betty in an orphanage until the very last. But the weirdest accidents were yet to come. Once, my mother found several needles in her pillow, and Dad's sneakers were full of broken glass. On that day, the parents harshly punished Ryan and gave him a month of home detention. My brother protested and told them that he was innocent, but no one believed him. At that time, I was sure that Ryan went too far with his tricks. Our psychologist explained to Mom that it was Ryan's way to draw attention to himself. Yet later, my brother admitted to me that he did not understand why he was constantly blamed for everything. The talk made me suspicious, and I decided to take a closer look at the always quiet Betty. And each time when my parents were scolding Ryan, I noticed a pleased smile on her face. One morning I went into the kitchen and I saw Betty sitting on the floor and trying to break a thermometer. I've got no idea what she was going to do with the mercury, but I stopped her on time. The girl noticed me, threw out the thermometer, and quickly ran to her room. I went right after my sister and tried to talk to her, but she cried loudly and called the parents. When they came running, Betty complained about me hitting her and even showed a trace of the blow on her arm. I tried to defend myself and said that I hadn't done anything wrong, but Mom and Dad stood up for Betty again. After that incident, I realized that my new sister was not adapting or anything. She was skillfully manipulating our entire family. But how could an 8-year-old think of such a thing? I suspected that there was an adult mastermind behind the scenes. Once I returned home from school earlier than usual and saw Betty, who tried to close the balcony door in a hurry. She wasn't clearly expecting my arrival, and I smelled cigarette smoke. Besides, there were unfamiliar women's sunglasses on the table. A stranger came to our apartment when nobody was at home. I thought that Betty's real mom or sister had visited her, but once again, the little liar managed to get away with it. When I showed the glasses to my parents, my new sister explained that her classmate forgot them at school, and our little angel Betty brought the forgotten glasses home to give it back to the classmate the next day. Again, Mom and Dad believed Betty, not me. That night, I wasn't able to fall asleep. Something was wrong with that child. Parents did not even notice how she skillfully manipulated them. Honestly, I was already a bit afraid of the little prude and her antics. It was very late at night, and I was finally getting sleepy when I suddenly heard a strange sound in the hallway. I got very angry and decided to catch her red-handed. "Gotcha!" I roared while turning on the light. But instead of Betty, I saw Ryan. I asked him where he was going, and my brother told me that he wanted to leave home. I shared my suspicions with him and said that I needed his help more than ever to bring our lying sister to justice. The next morning, we agreed to take turns monitoring the sister, but she saw through our plan that very day and started fighting back. When I was at school, Betty managed to lure Ryan to the balcony and lock him there for 2 hours. And when the parents returned from work and opened the balcony door, she showed them some cigarette butts hidden there beforehand. Therefore, the parents thought that Ryan started smoking. Mom and Dad were very upset because of that find. They even thought of sending my brother to a military school so that at least he would be taught discipline. But Ryan and I knew that everything was all arranged by her sister. She was a horrible liar. Each time, the mischievous little girl adjusted everything for us two to appear guilty. That very evening, I was able to eavesdrop on the conversation between Mom and Dad. They were really hell-bent on sending Ryan to military school. And later on, when I saw Betty, she gave me a nasty look and whispered that I would be next. At that moment, I really got scared. I couldn't believe that an 8-year-old child was behaving like an adult conspirator. Now I was totally sure that the girl was an unusual child. There was something terrifying hidden behind her eyes. So I decided to talk with Betty's teacher. The teacher said that the studies were very easy for my new sister, and she was the best in class. Besides, at school, Betty behaved like a little dictator. She issued commands to the children, and they did whatever she wanted. They even gave her their pocket money. The next day, my parents, as usual, drove to school to get Betty home. But the teacher said that my new sister hadn't been seen at school. Dad immediately called the police and filed a report of abduction. But the worst was yet to come. A week later, various strangers began calling our parents. They wished to receive a ransom for the kid. The strangers said that otherwise, Mom and Dad would never see Betty again. All this time, the parents were very afraid. They didn't even allow me and Ryan to go to school. The extortionists called every day and threatened to kidnap us as well. Mom and Dad replied that they were ready to meet all conditions, if only to save Betty. But the strangers suspected that my parents had contacted the police and constantly changed the place and time for the money transfer. In a few days, our dad managed to meet with the kidnappers and gave them some marked bills. Dad worked in tandem with the police officers, so the case was closed quickly enough. Soon, several police cars drove up to our house at once. Mom was still very worried. She was afraid that the kidnappers had harmed Betty. Even my brother and I were worried about our new sister. We expected to see a whole gang of extortionists, but the police escorted only one tiny girl in sunglasses. We did not understand what was happening and why they weren't bringing our new sister back. But suddenly, the girl took off her wig and glasses, and then we realized that it was Betty. Yet she looked somehow strange. Only later, the officers told us that in fact, Betty was not 8, but almost 21 years old. The little girl from the orphanage, whom my parents adored, turned out to be an experienced, cold-blooded criminal. She planned her own abduction all by herself and played all of us like a fiddle. Betty was brought low only by my and Ryan's caution and my dad's decision to contact the police. Betty's story was true only on one regard. The girl was a real orphan and had spent all her childhood years in an orphanage. I can't even imagine how a little girl with a rare genetic disorder had managed to survive that hell. Yet later, she made good use of that disorder. Only because of it, Betty managed to trick my parents. Due to the disorder, Betty's body stopped growing when she was 8 years old. Usually people suffering from such a disorder have the body of a child and the face of an adult. But Betty got lucky. She kept her childish face intact. But behind that face, there was an adult woman who simply hated everyone around her. Ryan and I were really lucky. Betty didn't manage to get her plan into action. If everything went according to her calculations, our so-called sister would have sent my brother to military school. After that, she would have somehow got rid of me as well. And then, Betty would have made herself Mom and Dad's most favorite child. And you know what? Betty's plan would have most likely been successful. Good thing was that Betty messed everything up. She failed because of her greed. The girl was constantly milking her frightened classmates, but their pocket money wasn't good enough for her. So Betty came up with a daring plan that included abduction. Yet our adoptive sister did not expect Dad to go to the police. Well, the police quickly brought the criminal to clean water. After the conversation with the police, my parents still wanted to talk to Betty. Mom could not hold back the tears. The officer asked the girl whether she wanted to apologize to my parents, but Betty only mockingly smiled. In justification, the girl only said that she had grown up in an orphanage and only wanted to experience a real childhood. That's how our story ended. At my family meeting, we decided not to talk about Betty ever again. Only a month later, we learned that the girl managed to escape from the detention center. It's possible that she has already found herself new parents who do not even suspect whom they actually adopted. As for us, we've never heard about her again. A whole year has passed since the police took Betty away, but even now I sometimes have nightmares about her return.
Hi, guys and gals. I'm John, and I've spent almost all my conscious life in absolute darkness. Doctors made me able to see only 6 months ago. And now I am ready to confess. It would be better if I remained blind forever. My parents told me that for the first several months of my life, they did not even realize that I could not see. I behaved just like any normal baby. Stared at anything that grabbed my attention, cried, and eagerly shook the baby rattle before falling asleep. Mom and Dad began to suspect that something was wrong only when I started learning to walk. After several of my unlucky collisions with stools, chairs, and tables that ended with bumps and bruises, my parents took me to a doctor. There, he told them that I was as blind as a bat. Funny thing is, the doctors could not even explain to Mom and Dad why my eyes refused to work as they should. The medics drew their eyebrows together, frowned, shook their heads, gave my parents some lengthy lectures with dozens of complex terms in Latin, but weren't able to give any adequate explanation. In time, my parents realized that my eyes were fine. The problem was with my brain. Some of the important connections there have never formed. Therefore, the doctors agreed that I had zero chance to become sighted in the future. Mom and Dad had to accept the fact that their son will never be able to see their faces. Raising a blind child was a difficult trial for my parents. I was too small to understand why my mother often cried in her room at night. She must have gone there to cry so as not to embarrass me with her tears. Unfortunately, the parents did not take into account that the blind have better hearing than the sighted. We use other senses to compensate for the lack of eyes, and they always become much sharper as a result. My hearing was super good, so I hear my mother's crying very clearly. I also heard that Dad have always comforted her, and when Dad himself was on the verge of surrendering, Mom always came to help him. Long ago, when I initially realized that my parents were crying because of me, I felt very upset and offended. I even wanted to come to Mom and Dad and proudly ask him to take me to the orphanage. There, I figured, they would be able to get another child that won't upset them. You know, at the time, I was just a small, resentful child. Fortunately, I've never done so. I quickly realized that our life has already been hard for Mom and Dad, and my folly would only upset them even more. At the same time, I'd like to acknowledge everything my parents did for me. Neither my mom nor dad showed me that I was any worse than my peers. I am sincerely grateful to my father and mother. Without the education they gave me, I would hardly achieve anything through life. Their support was invaluable. Until recently. I successfully graduated from high school and even entered a good college, all due to the support from Mom and Dad. They found specialists who taught me how to read Braille. Of course, I had to study in a special school, of course. But my school years were top-notch. But the music club where I learned how to play guitar was just a normal club. I studied there side by side with normal children. And somehow, I had better grades than most of my healthy peers. Until recently, I did consider myself ill or special. I had good friends, a loyal and loving girlfriend, an excellent hobby and serious goal for the future. You see, I was really hoping to become a perfumer. Of course, I always needed help with mixing the solutions. But the smells that I made were amazing. My concoctions surprised even the adult specialists. If there was such a thing as innate talent, then I was simply born to become a perfumer. I've already mentioned earlier that due to a lack of vision, all my other senses were extremely aggravated. It turned out that becoming a perfumer was much easier when your nose feels a gamut of odors completely inaccessible to all of your sighted classmates. Unfortunately, I've still got some difficulties to handle. Due to allergies, I could not get a guide dog. I traveled confidently among familiar routes, but I could not get into unfamiliar places without a friend or relative to guide me. Otherwise than that, however, I had zero problems. I guess it would have been much worse if I had initially been a sighted child and became blind later. But I was blind from birth and could not even imagine how sighted people perceive the world. I lived in a dark but comfortable world of my own, full of sounds, smells, and touches, and I was comfortable in that world of mine. Of course, Mom and Dad have constantly been telling me that sooner or later I would be able to see. I was waiting for this moment, and even hoped that they were right, but I had no idea what it was like to see anything. Well, I guess you wouldn't be able to understand me. For someone who has been blind since birth, promises of being able to see sound just like promises of a personal meeting with Santa. The older you become, the less you believe in it. But in my case, the promises of Dad and Mom transcended into reality. Sadly, now I'm not at all sure that this turned out to be for the best. I've gained sight in a rather unusual way. A thriving medical corporation was testing a new way of healing the brain that had something to do with nerves. I won't tell you the details. When it came to them, the doctors were unable to describe their own action in a way that I could understand. They promised me that in a case of success, I'd become sighted. And the most interesting thing was that I would not have to pay a penny for this. Dad and Mom were very wary when they heard, but corporate representatives quickly reassured my parents. Moreover, they promised to pay me a tidy sum for what was essentially a test of the company's newest product. I had nothing to lose, so we quickly agreed to the proposal of the doctors. Good news arrived almost immediately. During the initial checkup, the doctors noticed that the connections in my brain improved due to the changes that came with adolescence. So a chance of their new method's success increased to almost 100%. Parents were thrilled. Their greatest dream was finally going to be fulfilled. But I still wondered how sight could affect my life. I spent 2.5 months in the hospital room, having left it only to get another operation or two. That time was painful and scary, but thanks to my parents, I still held faith in the doctors. Mom and Dad convinced me that as soon as I would be able to see, I would immediately understand what I'd been missing for all these years. Unfortunately, the result was exactly the opposite. When my vision returned, I was horrified. The chaotic, noisy, and strange world I found myself in was wildly uncomfortable. People around me were vastly different from what I imagined them to be for my entire life. The comfortable universe of mine was shattered into pieces, and putting it together again turned out to be very difficult. I've spent 2 whole months assembling my own life back again brick by brick, gradually getting used to the new world around me. For the first 3 weeks after becoming sighted, I hardly even slept. I found it immensely scary to lose my vigilance in this eerie, colorful universe for even a single moment, not to mention the whole long night. Insomnia, multiple nervous breakdowns, panic attacks, and immense misunderstanding of what was happening around me. Those first months were horrible, to say the least. And the worst thing was that I had to cope with all of it alone. First of all, I tried to get support from mom and dad, but they just refused to understand my problems. Moreover, they accused me of trying to nullify all their efforts. I think they despise me now. My parents somehow thought that I've just become a drama queen out of nowhere. By the way, doctors say that in situations like mine, help of an experienced psychologist is vitally important. Unfortunately, mom and dad were sure that I was actually able to cope with all the problems myself, and even that I came up with most of the difficulties. Dad once told mom, "That kid's just used to being an attention hog," and mom nodded in agreement. And my friends, I've soon discovered that they weren't true to me. In a few weeks, I realized that my girlfriend, whom I'd been dating for 2 years, was cheating on me with my best friend right behind my back. Those two tried to hide their relationship when they realized that I really became sighted. But once I caught them in the act, naturally, I immediately broke up with her. All of my pals were not much better. For each of them, I was either a source of some advantages or a way to feel like a virtuous angel, but not a living, breathing friend who needed help and support. So it turned out that I had to cope with this whole world of noise and colors alone. And frankly speaking, I fared not that well. My performance at school has fallen by an order of magnitude. And now my parents constantly scold me because of it. Every day they accuse me of being an ungrateful swine. They've sacrificed everything for the sake of my sight, and now it turned out to be a bitter disappointment. And I have nothing to answer them. Try telling dad and mom that all their efforts were in vain, and it would be much better for me to stay blind. In fact, my problems at school, sleep disorders, and nervous breakdowns come from one source. You see, I found myself in a completely new world, and this world causes me to stay constantly on guard. It is very difficult to cope with such stress without any support. Even the changes of my reaction rate come from the very same source. I was used to navigating the world with zero vision, and now my vision only bothers me instead of helping. It forces me to check and double-check the same things again and again and again. Oh, how I wish to return to that comfortable darkness. Even my dreams of becoming a perfumer were ruined. Due to the newfound vision, it was no longer possible for me to concentrate on the smell as I had been before. Now I can't even replicate the concoctions I've been making before, let alone make some new ones. My life was far more easier when I've been blind. Now I find myself in a strange and frightening world where my friends and family turned out to be either traitors or egoists. Oh, how I'd like to go back in time and dissuade mom and dad from the operation by any means. Alas, this is impossible, and I still do not understand how should I live now.
Hello, everyone. My name's Felicia, and recently my life has made an incredibly unexpected turn. You see, my mom brought a recently released criminal home, and now I don't know what to do. I don't know my dad. I have never met him. Maybe I've seen him once or twice when I was a toddler. Mom used to tell me different stories about him. When I was still a kid, she said that he was an astronaut and disappeared deep in space. Another time she told me that he left us, and once even said that he was kidnapped. There were so many versions of my dad's fate, some fantastic, some prosaic. The only thing I understood was that he was still alive. He just didn't need either me or Mom. To be fair, I never really suffered from his absence. Guess I had too many horrible fathers. My mother and I lived in a pretty rough neighborhood, and there were no perfect white-collar workers among our neighbors. Alcoholics, gang members, petty tyrants, I've seen them all. My friends constantly complained that they felt horrible at home. Constant scandals, some terrible demands. One girl even got beaten by her dad because she wore bright makeup, and she was already 18. I listened to all these stories, and I was happy that I had no dad. Mom didn't yell and never put her hands on me. We were always able to come to terms and really enjoyed spending a lot of time together. Mom taught me everything a girl needed to know, and she also taught me self-defense and some useful rules of life, such as you really didn't want to return home late at night if you lived in a bad neighborhood. Mom rarely forbade me anything. She understood that it was okay for a 15-year-old to talk to friends on the phone, wear makeup, and stay at a friend's house twice or thrice a month. She never called my friends and their parents in a senseless panic. The girls actually envied me because of my supermom. We even had enough money to live comfortably. No extra pampering, of course, but we always had more than enough money for food, clothes, and any gadgets. Mom even paid for my college because I wasn't an honor roll pupil and earned no scholarship. I didn't really know how much the economists are paid, but my mom was paid really well. But then a man appeared in our wonderful life. His name was Larry, and he was disgusting. I don't know where my mom found this creepy male specimen, but one day I came home from college and Larry was already there, sitting in our clean kitchen drinking tea. And then he told me to call him Dad right off the bat. To say I was shocked was an understatement. There are other obscene words for my feelings at the moment. Dad? Really? What the hell? And the most terrible thing was that my mom supported him and didn't even look like herself. She was smiling, she wore a beautiful dress, and she was cooking that monster dinner. And she looked very happy for some reason. Well, I'm an adult girl, so after I coped with the initial shock, I just shrugged my shoulders and went to my room. My mom's personal life was of little interest to me. I was 17 and occupied with my own inability to find a suitable boyfriend. Besides, I naively thought that Larry would be leaving soon, but Larry decided to stay. To be honest, I was really afraid of him. Not only did he look like a monster, he had a temper to match. And for some reason, that man decided I urgently needed to learn how to behave. Each of my missteps was met with some lessons from Larry. Moreover, the things he considered horrible were completely normal for us until he appeared. For example, he scolded me about the dirty socks left in the bathroom. Well, yeah, I left them there, so what? I was still going to bathe in the evening and I'd wash them along the way. But Larry took those socks as a personal affront and each time tried to shove them into my face while shouting at me and waving hands. Then he began to check my grades, reprimanding me in the process. And once or twice he forcibly washed my face in the bathroom because, quote, good girls don't wear bright makeup. Hello, what the hell? I'm already 17. That's how my life turned into a complete nightmare. Larry forbade me to go out with friends and to talk to my girlfriends on the phone. But when I asked whether I was allowed to breathe, he called me a selfish and spoiled brat. I didn't understand at all. What did that have to do with me? He's just Mom's boyfriend after all. Besides, I had no idea how she could ever date him in the first place. It seemed to me that Larry did nothing on the house, except for educating me, of course. He sat on the sofa all day, ate a crap load of food, and periodically shouted at Mom. And she just kept smiling and nodding. Besides, he turned out to be not only a petty tyrant, but also a real criminal. I found out that he had just recently gotten out of prison. After discovering that, I became really scared. I was afraid that he'd do something to me, my mom, or even my friends. Besides, I didn't know what he was in for. He might have been convicted for murder, committed with grave violence, and now he's living in our house, looking for new victims. Did Mom really feel so lonely without a man to tolerate such an animal beside her? So in the end, I just couldn't stand it. Once I came home from school and noticed that someone had rifled through my things. That was obviously not my mom because we respected each other's personal space. I just could not stand such a situation. I gave Mom an ultimatum. She had to choose between me and Larry. I did not want to live in constant fear and endure the whims of a horrible, horrible man. Of course, I was sure that Mom would choose me. And Mom chose him. Well, actually, she asked me to stop messing around and come to terms with the fact that our house now had a strong male presence. I didn't want to come to terms with that, so I immediately packed up my things and left.
Hello, my darlings. I am Felicia's mother, and now I have to watch how my daughter makes the biggest mistake in her life. You see, our family has a secret that she doesn't know about. The man my daughter knows as Larry is actually her real dad. Our neighborhood has always been famous for its gangs. Of course, no one will tell you about that via tourist booklets, but the fact is a fact. When you are young, such things seem quite romantic and all. So the gangs always had a pool of potential recruits to choose from. Quick cash, guns, illegal deals. Now it sure sounds creepy, but when we were young, we thought that the criminal way was the only way to find a self-respecting man. No, I never participated in any crime myself, but almost all of my acquaintances were connected to criminal activities in some way. Even my closest friends and family members worked for the gangs. Larry proposed to me when both of us were only 18. He said that he did not want to wait. He could be killed in a shootout at any time. That's when I first thought that we were doing something wrong with our lives. Well, we never officially got married. I became pregnant and wanted to wait with the wedding. Then we had a small child and had no time to think about rituals and such stuff. And then the situation in the neighborhood changed. Police activity was intensified. They made a lot of raids. The gangs turned on each other just to survive. I was even afraid to go out due to numerous firefights in the streets. So I just stayed at home with little Felicia and prayed to our Lord for Larry. Unfortunately, once my prayers did not work, and he did not return. Still, I was happy that he was alive, even if that meant 17 years of prison. You see, some of my friends buried their men. That was the beginning of my double life. On one hand, I was trying to be the best mom for my charming girl, a good worker, and a good housewife. And on the other hand, I was waiting for my husband to become free. According to my documents, I was a single mother, and Felicia's papers had no mentions of her father at all. Larry and I had a talk about that, and ultimately decided to leave everything as is, so that our girl won't have any problems with work and studies in the future. Larry stayed behind bars, but he still managed to support us and send us money. I never asked about the details, but once a week, young guys visited the office where I worked and brought envelopes full of cash. If I needed to have something done about the house, to fix the roof, for example, or similar kinds of stuff, I just called a special number and my problems were soon solved. Larry even somehow managed to pay for Felicia's college. In fact, we lived on his money because my salary was just a cover so that the cops would not ask any questions. I won't be able to raise my girl on my own. And then Larry came back. I was the happiest woman in the world. In fact, I was so happy that I completely forgot about Felicia. And then I could only watch how these two destroy everything with their pointless conflict. Yes, Larry does have a difficult personality. He definitely can be a handful. But I was sure that he loved me and my daughter. And it was terribly painful for me to watch their quarrels. They constantly shouted at each other and could not find a common ground. I asked Larry to be just a bit softer and asked Felicia not to be so brash, but they both refused to listen to me. I knew that Larry was also upset. He dreamed of their meeting. He wanted to see his daughter, and all he got was a hysterical teenager who hated him. I even asked both of them to undergo a couples therapy course together, but still, they didn't listen to me. And now my Felicia left our home. I am completely at a loss. I have no idea how to reconcile my family, and most importantly, how to convince my daughter that Larry is really her father, who actually gave her everything she has now.
Hello, everyone. My name is Linda, and I am literally unable to lie. But apparently, I've been cursed long ago. Otherwise, I can't explain why no one ever believes me. Other than that, I'm not much different than other teenagers. I'm quite mischievous and capricious. My mood changes from good to lousy at a moment's notice. And I'm pretty sure that sometimes I cause certain problems to my parents. I can't really complain about my parents, by the way. They are and have always been adequate and understanding. The thing is that my organism has one interesting feature. I can't lie. Technically, I cook up any story if I wish, from the most unrealistic ones to those undistinguishable from actual truth. Yet my own body apparently believes that lying is a wrong thing to do. So each time I try to make a story, I get sick and my stomach turns inside out. That is why I never lie. I just don't like it when I vomit all over the teacher's feet right in front of the classroom or during the church service. I don't even lie in small matters. Again, Theoretically, my parents should have known about the personal characteristic of mine, but oh well, it's complicated. No matter how many times I was proven right, still no one believed me. For some unknown reason, everyone was adamantly convinced that I lied. It just felt awful, to be honest, and it was especially hurtful when my parents doubted me. Every time I told them the truth, they were completely shocked. I guess I can understand my parents if I consider how the situation looked for them. Mom and Dad found it hard to know that their little girl wasn't so little after all. You know, when you're 16, chances are slim that you're dating a guy just to read poetry together. And of course, every teenager does a lot of not-so-good things when no one's watching. The saddest thing is that the parents constantly asked me direct questions, and I was simply unable to lie. So each time they were shocked, and I felt guilty. Oh, if only they stopped asking me so many questions. Alas, such was their nature. For example, they once asked what my boyfriend Alex and I did in the evening, and I told them the truth. And then they asked if I'd ever taken a bottle of my dad's whiskey from the bar and received another direct answer. But somehow, Mom and Dad still didn't believe me. Of course, I was always willing to forgive them for mistrust, although once it almost turned into a personal tragedy for me. My boyfriend is smart enough to not pester me with excess questions, although he is also far from ideal. You see, he is very jealous. So he often asks me if I have feelings towards someone else. Of course, he always receives an honest answer, but he never believes it. And I have to collect numerous evidence of my innocence. It feels strange. It makes my brain ache, yes, but I will never leave my boyfriend because I love him. All the other misunderstandings are trifles to me. I've learned to survive the conflicts with teachers and classmates long ago. Yet still, the true tragedy began at school. One day during the lessons, I suddenly felt a sharp pain in my stomach. The pain was so terrible that I even fell under the desk, howling and cursing. The teacher, fortunately, did not ask me anything and immediately sent me to the first aid post. But the pain did not go away. And when I asked the nurse for help, she only shook her head and told me that lying was a sin. Can you imagine that? I was writhing in pain, and the nurse accused me of lying and refused to give me aid. Naturally, I made a huge scene and demanded her to call the doctors. But because of the nurse's stubbornness, I've lost a lot of time. As a result, I was barely clinging to consciousness when they brought me to the hospital. Soon my parents arrived there too and began to tell the doctors that everything was okay. Apparently, they thought that I was just pretending. My face was white from pain. My eyes were full of tears, and they kept telling the medics that it was just a prank of mine. Fortunately, the doctors ignored Mom and Dad's words and concentrated on my well-being. It turned out that they brought me to the hospital, and at the last second, I had peritonitis. My appendix would simply burst inside of me if the doctors decided to listen to Mom and Dad's words. In that case, I could have easily died. But the specialists at the hospital were aware of the threat and performed appendectomy just in time. Still, I had to lay in the hospital for 2 weeks, and those weeks were full of suffering and pain. Well, guess what? My parents still refused to believe me. They said that I made all this up so I could skip the test. Yeah, and somehow they thought I even persuaded the doctors to play a part in my plan, as if I've always dreamt to skip the test and receive 2 weeks of pain and a large scar running through the whole stomach in exchange. We had a big quarrel because their point of view looked like a sick joke to me, to be honest. My attending physician supported me, so my parents had to shut up and stop blaming me for nearly dying. Unfortunately, school teachers still were sure that I had been trying to skip a test. I wrote it later, in front of a specially appointed committee. That was the first time I realized the full scope of my problems. For the first time, I felt the fullest extent of how terrible it was when no one believed me. So I decided to start lying. Yes, I'd get sick and all, but the truth had almost cost my life, and I wanted to live. The next 6 months turned into a total nightmare. I just lied left and right, lost 22 pounds, and almost became bald because I vomited a lot each day. But miraculously, everyone believed me, no matter what I said. Even when I composed stories with the credibility of fairy tales, people still believed every word I fed them. It was a very bitter paradox. When I told people the truth, they were adamantly sure that I was a liar. When I started spinning tales, everyone suddenly believed each and every one of my words. I'm afraid they'd even believe me if I told them that it was me who brought the ring to Mordor instead of Frodo. If I didn't vomit like crazy, I'd even consider the whole situation funny as hell. Yet I still was spinning lies, because otherwise, I'd have turned into Cassandra once again. Unfortunately, my little experiment came to an end with another stay at the hospital. This time, they diagnosed me with exhaustion and vitamin deficiency. The doctors told me that I was slowly killing myself from the constant vomiting. Of course, I was not ready to fade away, but remain a good girl in the eyes of my acquaintances, so I stopped lying altogether. Unfortunately, as the experience has already shown, the truth was pretty harmful to my well-being as well. The pendulum had swung back, and I again became the teacher's main suspect and the most dubious character all around. Therefore, all my previous torments were just the beginning. It was getting worse with each passing day. The first serious problem has been waiting for me at school. A teacher from the examination committee decided that I cheated on a very important test. I certainly did not, but I got a chance to prove it only after several requests to the Ministry of Education. I retook the exam alone in front of the entire staff of teachers. Of course, I scored a B+ again and even made the same mistakes as during the initial test. So the examiners had to agree that they screwed up. Therefore, the teachers gave me a certificate with all the honors. Even the headmaster personally apologized to me in front of the whole school. But unfortunately, my story did not end there. The tragedy caught up with me several days before I was ready to move to a hostel. And that was the reason of why I prefer not to communicate with people at all nowadays. There were no earthquakes in our area, although it was considered mountainous. But mud flows or floods sometimes happened, and the residents were more or less ready for them, although usually we were warned about the approach of such anomalies several hours beforehand in order to evacuate the ill and the old and to give enough time to those who remain at home no matter what. It just turned out that the phrase, "there are no earthquakes here," actually means usually there are no earthquakes here. And the cataclysm occurred just when I was the only person left at home in the whole area. It was a working day during the school holidays. The kids were all far from homes. All adults were at work. And at that morning, I decided to spend the day in my room, talking to random people in chat rooms, sleeping, and watching Netflix. So I was just happily minding my business when the house suddenly started shaking. I knew exactly what the earthquake looked like because once I've already been evacuated from the building during the earthquake. It happened when my class and I had been on the tour at a neighboring city. Therefore, when the earth slightly shaked, I immediately collected all of our documents and then left home. Then I called the police, rescuers, neighbors, and my parents. As you definitely remember, no one ever believed me when I told the truth. Besides, there were no earthquakes in my area for generations. So even if someone trustworthy brought such news, no one would have believed it. Therefore, everyone and their mother thought I was just crying wolf. I screamed at them. I cried. I even asked the police to come and find me in case of a false call, but no one at all, responded. And at some point, I just gave up and stopped caring. Documents and valuables from my house were already in my backpack, so I just found a safe hiding place and waited until the cataclysm was all. I really wanted to run away, but I simply did not know where I should run and how long the earthquake would last. I got lucky. The ground did not open and devour me, and I survived the tremors with only a couple of bruises. But every house on our street was utterly destroyed. They were reduced to rubble. All the homes just collapsed on themselves like a house of cards. Only someone's toilet seat rolled down the main street like a tumbleweed. Only then that rescue workers came together with the police, my parents, and the neighbors, who were screaming like a herd of sheep. And every neighbor somehow blamed me for everything. They told me that I should have warned everyone, that I should have been talking more convincingly. The parents, on the other hand, praised me for sharp wit. I've saved all the valuable things and successfully survived unharmed after all. But all the neighbors were pretty much ready to lynch me with torches and pitchforks in tow. Each of them suddenly hated me so much. It was as if I had not screamed warnings into the phone for about 15 minutes straight before I finally gave up. I then left my hometown literally right away and checked into a dorm room. where I was supposed to live during college. The commandment let me in early. Because of the devastation caused by the earthquake, my parents moved to a hotel and began to rebuild the house. After the incident, they reviewed their attitude towards people in general, and me in particular. Since then, I try to communicate with people only on business. I don't give advice. I'm not sharing any secrets or having small talk with anyone. If something happens with those around me, I just shrug. It's hard for me to feign indifference, but I don't want to be guilty of what I didn't do anymore. So this is my story. Write in the comments if something similar happened to you. Did anyone refuse to believe you in spite of everything? Share the video with those who don't trust you. And remember that lying is bad anyway, even if the whole world is against you.